Okay, so most of you have heard my story before. Well, it changed 2 weeks ago. So, life before homeless, I lived with my parents until I was 27. And then we moved to Boston, and we got to Boston. We stayed with his friends for a couple weeks. Realized that apartments in Boston are extremely expensive. So we were out on the streets after a couple weeks. I personally loved it. It was fun. I learned a whole lot because it was my first time in Boston and stuff. And me, I'm pretty much an optimist, so I try to make the best of every situation. Well, we went from Boston and we came to Rhode Island. We stayed at Crossroads for 2 months, I think, and then we went back to New York. Well, Bob had gotten sick, so he wanted to come back to see his doctors in Boston that he's been with forever. So we got back to Boston. What they thought was cancer turned out to be a very, very bad fungal infection in his throat. So they finally got that cleared up, and we realized we couldn't stay in Boston again. So we came to Rhode Island because we knew it was close enough for him to go see his doctors, yet we still could afford rent and stuff here. So we came here in November. January 8th, we moved into an apartment. It was working great. And then April, my husband had a stroke. And that basically changed my life, turned it upside down. Because it went from him being the talker and the one that gets things done to me having to do everything. Shopping, cleaning, everything. Well, that was going good, and then my dad had a stroke in October. So we went there, and I got to say goodbye to him before he passed away. We were gonna move back there to help my mom out, but I just couldn't leave Rhode Island. So we got back here in the middle of December. Again, everything was going okay. The Monday of the luncheon, went to the luncheon, came home, started to relax. All of a sudden, heard the fire alarm go off. And I'm hearing it, I'm like, well, maybe they burnt their food in the front apartment. And then I guess somebody opened the back door and it got loud. And I went outside, I'm like, what's happening? And then I go to the side of my house, and there's a guy across the street, like, get out, your house is on fire. I'm like, oh, that's great. So I had to go in the house, put my husband in his wheelchair, get my husband out of the house, try to get whatever I could out of the house before I had to actually get out of the house, which was basically his debit card and my phone. Red Cross showed up. We got 2 nights in a hotel. We went there that night. The next day, we had been going through the process of getting an apartment at Pawtucket Housing. So I went and told them what was going on. They said, well, come back Thursday. Me and my husband went back Thursday. They go, you got the place. Went to the place. The lady's like, well, when can you move in? I'm like, today? Then in 4 days, I went from being homeless to being housed. The night the fire started, I had on a pair of froggy pajamas and a pink shirt and no shoes. These I'm borrowing from a lady that lived by me. I'm walking to the store to get a drink and a couple other things. My pajamas on and a blanket around my shoulders. I'm like, well, why are these people looking at me like I'm homeless? That's when it hit me that I was homeless. I'm like, I haven't been homeless for over a year. And then all of a sudden, because 2 kids were playing with matches and started the mattress on fire, I'm homeless again. And it wasn't even my fault this time. And I remember the next day, I'm like, all I wanted to do was go home. I was in the motel, but all I wanted to do was go home because I didn't have anything. Starting all over again. thankfully we're housed again, so going through the shelter with my husband that had a stroke would have been extremely tough at times because he can't really speak for himself. He gets loud when he gets frustrated, so that would have been terrible. But thankfully we're housed now, so